Shen Shu still had feelings for Yu Songnian, so when they met again years later, Shen Shu asked if he wanted to marry him. 不办快逃. Shen Shu just finished texting his driver. As he was about to head outside, he glanced over casually. His gaze locked onto someone ahead and to the side. A man stood there. His back was turned. Casual for a party like this. The man with his back turned shifted slightly. Half his face came into view. Everything around him seemed to go quiet. Shen Shu remembered the first time he met Yu Songnian. He'd seen him first then too. Also just half his face. He looked more mature now. Taller. Shoulders maybe broader. Or maybe thinner. Shen Shu kept his expression neutral. His eyes traced Yu Songnian's features until his phone buzzed. The driver was calling, asking when to pick him up. Shen Shu's throat moved. He hesitated, then told the driver to come later. He hung up. He picked up his glass and walked toward Yu Songnian. On the way, he heard people gossiping about Yu Songnian. Nothing nice. They were looking down on Yu Songnian. Shen Shu didn't like that kind of contempt. Yu Songnian turned around. Before Shen Shu could say anything, Shen Shu looked at Yu Songnian calmly and directly. He didn't speak first. He was just thinking about how to introduce himself, figuring Yu Songnian probably didn't remember him. Surprisingly, Yu Songnian smiled at him. He reached out and waved hello. Shen Shu stared at Yu Songnian's smile, a bit dazed. When Shen Shu didn't respond, he figured Shen Shu didn't want to acknowledge him. His reputation was in ruins now. At this party, he'd already heard plenty of gossip. It made sense Shen Shu wouldn't want to talk to him. Yu Songnian's mind wandered until he heard what Shen Shu said next. He looked up at him, shocked. He asked Shen Shu to repeat what he just said. Shen Shu looked at Yu Songnian quietly. He wasn't upset. He just repeated the proposal. Will you marry me? Yu Songnian watched Shen Shu quietly, trying to figure out if this was a real proposal or if he was messing with him. When he saw the glass in Shen Shu's hand, he guessed that was what made Shen Shu propose on impulse. He reached out and took the glass from Shen Shu's hand. Yu Songnian handed Shen Shu's drink to a server. Shen Shu lifted his wrist to check the time, checking how much longer they could talk. The next second, Yu Songnian stepped forward. He put his arm around Shen Shu's waist. He pulled him aside. Kids chasing each other with cake ran past them, laughing. He was a bit shorter than Yu Songnian. In this position, his nose naturally pressed against Yu Songnian's neck. Yu Songnian wasn't wearing cologne. No smell of smoke or clean. Just his own scent. This interruption threw off Shen Shu's rhythm. Yu Songnian spoke first, turning him down. He told Shen Shu, you should marry someone you like. It's for the rest of your life. Well, Shen Shu and Yu Songnian hadn't seen each other in years. No contact at all. What kind of foundation for marriage was that? That's what he thought. But he kept trying to convince Yu Songnian. He said they could do a business marriage. Yu Songnian's eyes dimmed. His smile faded. He told Shen Shu there was no need. Shen Shu clenched his fists. He asked Yu Songnian if he had someone. When Yu Songnian said no, Shen Shu asked him if he didn't have anyone. Then what was the problem? His attitude almost made Yu Songnian helpless. He wanted to laugh at how absurd. Maybe sense in. Yu Songnian was about to say something he didn't want to hear. Shen Shu treated it like a business deal. He said if he was really worried, they could sign a contract with a set term, part ways amicably when the time came. Seeing Shen Shu treat this like a transaction, Yu Songnian's last trace of a smile disappeared. Shen Shu was looking at his face. He'd been looking since they met again. Yu Songnian now. His hair was a bit longer. His features hadn't changed much, just looked more tired. Probably because of his family mess. Or maybe at a party like tonight. Too many people had been cruel. Shu stared, lost in thought, until he heard Yu Songnian ask, why me? Shen Shu told Yu Songnian like he was coaxing a child. No one else is as good a fit as. Maybe worried Yu Songnian would refuse. He made a final concession. He said if he met someone he liked, they could end things right away. Yu Songnian finally answered. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. Just said he'd think about it. Shen Shu relaxed a bit. Not getting an immediate no meant there was still hope. He pulled out a business card and gave it to Yu Songnian. Told him to contact him once he decided. Yu Songnian found his all-business attitude amusing. He nodded and said okay. When Shen Shu turned to leave, Yu Songnian stopped him. He leaned down slightly, moved closer to Shen Shu. This crossed the usual social boundaries. It was more intimate. He looked at Shen Shu with those attractive eyes, asked if there wasn't a more personal reason he chose him. Meeting the person he'd crushed on for years, he'd taken the initiative to propose marriage. Yu Songnian looked at Shen Shu with those attractive eyes, asked if choosing to marry him didn't have a more personal reason. Shen Shu met his gaze. Their eyes locked. Neither looked away. Shen Shu said, you're good looking. Does that count? Yu Songnian paused. He straightened up, stepping back from the intimate distance. Not sure whether to laugh or cry. Said he wouldn't pressure him anymore. Told him if he had things to do, he should go. Shen Shu said goodbye and turned to leave. Yu Songnian watched Shen Shu's retreating figure. Didn't want to look away. Once Shen Shu turned around, he lifted his hand, used the back of it to cover half his face. His whole face was burning. Of everything he'd said, only the last part wasn't a lie. Once home, Shen Shu started preparing a place for him and Yu Songnian while thinking about what to include. He got a call from Lin Jisheng. As soon as the call connected, Lin Jisheng yelled, asking if he'd lost his mind. Said word got out about him proposing to Yu Songnian at the party everyone was talking about. Over the years, Lin Jisheng was the only one who'd figured out Shen Shu's feelings. He asked Shen Shu if he was trying to use his looks to get to Shu Bingzhang. Shu Bingzhang was Yu Songnian's father. Yu Songnian took his mother's name. Shu Bingzhang had married into the Yu family back then. Now he'd used the Yu family to rise up. He'd climbed all the way to councilman. Shen Shu explained to Lin Shen he wasn't using his looks. On the contrary, Yu Songnian would be better suited to using his. As soon as he finished, the call ended. Lin Zhisheng used action to express he was done trying to talk sense into Shen Shu. Shen Shu ignored it, put down his phone, and kept working. His phone buzzed again. He thought it was Lin Zhisheng, but a new message popped up on WeChat. A WeChat labeled Yu Songnian had sent him a message. Their last conversation was 6 years ago. Their chat history was only a few lines. The intro, when they added each other. Only today did it finally update. Yu Songnian sent a message, asking if he'd gotten home. Shen Shu replied with a yeah. Yu Songnian sent a smiling rabbit emoji, thinking about how Lin Jisheng always said he was like an old man, totally out of touch. Shen Shu opened the stickers tab, downloaded a Bangxing Wanggou, then switched back to the chat, told Yu Songnian his offer still stood, to let him know as soon as he thought it over. After sending that, Shen Shu felt his words seemed a bit too eager. He added another message, frustrated. Even if you say no, it's fine. Don't feel pressured. Yu Songnian replied that before he decided. He wanted to try dating him first. Shen Shu stared at the word dating, wondered if Yu Songnian had made a typo. Yu Songnian sent him a link to a play. Asked if he was interested in going to see it together this weekend. That's when Shen Shu realized Yu Songnian really wanted to date him. Yu Songnian set a time with him, then gave him an address. The address wasn't at the Yu house. It was a commercial apartment near a university. Shen Shu knew this so clearly, because that university was where he'd gone to school. But Shen Shu didn't ask. Even though being with Yu Songnian might mean dealing with his family's mess, that didn't make Shen Shu back down. He still really wanted to marry Yu Songnian. Like taking in a dirty little dog. He'd clean it up. Make it pretty again, like before. Because this was the Yu Songnian he wanted so bad, but couldn't have. 6 years ago, when Yu Songnian and Shen Yue first stepped into this house, Shen Shu had already heard about Yu Songnian. Shen Yuan was Shen Shu's half-brother, the illegitimate son the Shen family brought back. That day he'd just gotten back from tutoring. Walking through the front hall in slippers, he heard laughter. He looked toward the sound, saw Shen Yuan and another guy. The Shen house had great lighting. Sunlight danced on Yu Songnian's hair and lips, lit up his nose and lashes all warm. When Yu Songnian learned this was Shen Yuan's brother, he stood up and called out a greeting. Shen Shu stood there and didn't respond. He thought with how forward Yu Songnian was, with looks like that, he'd probably never been ignored before. He didn't mind being the first. Yu Songnian didn't seem bothered by Shen Shu ignoring him. He smiled and asked, "You're really good looking. Can I use you as a model?" Shen Shu never imagined that the first time Yu Songnian saw him, he'd dare say something like that. No one dared tell him to his face he was good looking. They only said he looked cold, unapproachable. Before he could react, Shen Yuan stepped forward, got in front of Yu Songnian, said he was talking nonsense. Shen Shu's brow furrowed deeper. He didn't say a word, turned and went upstairs. On the way, he heard Shen Yuan tell Yu Songnian that no matter how desperate he was for a model, he shouldn't pick Shen Shu. His voice was full of disgust. Yu Songnian's voice was low. Shen Shu couldn't hear what he said to Shen Yuan. He wasn't in the mood to know. He thought to himself, Yu Songnian not only had bad taste, he was also superficial. Their first meeting wasn't great. He had no way of knowing what Yu Songnian looked like painting other people, or if he was any good. Shen Shu pulled himself from the memory. He picked up his phone, started picking out what to wear on the date. That weekend, Shen Shu worried about traffic, so he left early. But the roads were clear. When he arrived, Shen Shu was a full 2 hours early. Shen Shu parked on the side of the road, a bit annoyed with himself. But he didn't rush Yu Songnian to come down. He figured Yu Songnian probably wasn't ready yet. So, he pulled out his type. He looked at company documents. After a while, someone knocked on his car window. Shen Su looked up, and his heart jumped. Outside the window was Yu Songnian, and his face showed the surprise Shen Su least wanted to see. Yu Songnian knocked on the window again. Shen Su quickly composed himself, calmly rolled down the window, and asked casually if he was ready. He glanced at what he was wearing. Yu Songnian had on a black tee, shirt and jeans, with some fresh paint stains on the jeans. The marks looked new, like he'd just gotten them. He was holding a bag of beer. Clearly Yu Songnian hadn't come down because it was time, but had just gotten back from shopping. However, he looked at Shen Su warmly, and asked him to wait a moment, then hurried upstairs. When he came back down, Yu Songnian had changed and added a casual blazer. Yu Songnian got in the passenger seat. He didn't ask Shen Su why he was so early, just told him they had time before the show, and asked if he wanted to grab something to eat. Shen Su gripped the steering wheel, a bit conflicted, because eating out wasn't in his plan. and he'd forgotten to look up any good restaurants. Yu Songnian noticed his hesitation and said they didn't have to eat. Shen Shu gathered his courage and asked if he had any suggestions. Yu Songnian smiled brightly and said there was a nice Spanish place with great ham. He entered the address in the car's navigation, but then turned to look at the booklet in the back seat and asked if it was for him. He was so casual, Shen Shu didn't deny it, saying it was their first date so he should bring flowers. Actually, he'd cut these flowers from his own garden with scissors while the gardener watched in dismay, and he'd clumsily wrapped them in paper and tied a bow. Yu Songnian had long arms, so he easily reached back and grabbed the bouquet, but whether it was bad luck or fate conspiring against Shen Shu today, the flowers that had held together fine in his hands that morning completely fell apart in Yu Songnian's. Yu Songnian sat there stunned with an armful of loose flowers. It looked pretty ridiculous. But Shen Shu couldn't laugh. The flowers were wet, and now dampened Yu Songnian's pants. So he quickly grabbed tissues and pressed them on Yu Songnian's leg to wipe it. After just a couple wipes, Yu Songnian looked uncomfortable and grabbed his hand, saying he didn't need to wipe it, he'd just go change pants. Shen Shu apologized, feeling defeated. Yu Songnian gathered up all the flowers and said he'd take them up and put them in a vase. Everyone likes having their gestures appreciated, and Shen Shu is no different. Yu Songnian got out of the car, but stopped after a few steps. He asked Shen Shu if he wanted to come up with him. Shen Shu was sharp and eloquent in business dealings. But somehow with Yu Songnian, that cleverness disappeared, and he became clumsy and slow. He didn't answer right away, so Yu Songnian said he had Spanish ham at home too, and though he didn't have a full meal, he could make him a sandwich. The invitation was clear enough that Shen Shu had no reason to refuse. He was more interested in Yu Songnian's place than the Spanish restaurant anyway, inviting his longtime crush over. But he'd almost discovered his secret. Yu Songnian led Shen Shu to sit on the couch, then went to the kitchen to get him water. Shen Shu looked around the apartment and noticed an easel in the corner, with an unfinished painting on it. Like a man's profile, but where the eye should be was a stroke of deep red, like a red ribbon bound across the man's face. Since the painting wasn't finished, Shen Shu only found it vaguely familiar. Yu Songnian came out with coffee and saw Shen Shu staring at the painting. Suddenly looking nervous, he rushed over and covered the painting with a cloth, saying it wasn't done yet. Shen Shu looked away and took a sip of coffee. Some artists only want people close to them to see unfinished work. Even though he'd already proposed to Yu Songnian, their relationship was still just casual acquaintances. Ever since Yu Songnian covered that unfinished painting, Shen Shu seemed a bit unhappy. He noticed Shen Shu didn't look comfortable, even on the soft couch. While he was studying the man in front of him, his foot accidentally touched Shen Shu's, and Shen Shu immediately pulled his foot back. Yu Songnian propped his chin on his hand, tilting his head to look at him, like examining a rare creature. This made Shen Shu nervous. He started wondering if he'd worn the wrong clothes, or had something on his face. To avoid awkwardness, he cleared his throat, and asked Yu Songnian about the sandwich. Yu Songnian looked startled, and said he'd forgot. He pushed himself up from the coffee table, and before leaving, added something dangerous. I got lost looking at you and forgot. Shen Shu felt flustered, and grabbed his coffee again, to calm down. Yu Songnian's habit of saying flirty things hadn't changed from when he was 17 to now, at 25. Shen Shu thought if they really got married, he'd need to add a clause to the contract that Yu Songnian couldn't go around saying suggestive things to other people. If he violated it, Shen Shu thought for a while, but couldn't figure out how to punish Yu Songnian. Soon, Yu Songnian brought over a sandwich. Shen Shu looked at the plate and was about to reach for it when he hesitated, just as he was thinking about getting up to ask where the bathroom was. Yu Songnian suddenly realized, grabbed a sanitizing wipe from the table, got down on one knee, and naturally took his hand. The wipe was soft and cool. Yu Songnian's palm was rough and warm, trapping his hand between them. Yu Songnian was meticulous, wiping each of Shen Shu's fingers like he was a helpless child. When he finished, he told Shen Shu he didn't have gloves at home, so he'd have to make do. Shen Shu pulled his hand back, trying to look composed as he put it at his side, but his palm still tingled. Shen Shu ate the sandwich under Yu Songnian's expectant gaze. After the simple meal, they left Yu Songnian's place and headed to the theater. Watching his crush turned into a pitiful Cinderella, Shen Shu had mixed feelings. This stage play was famous and expensive, and in the past, Shen Shu would have happily accepted the invitation. But now Yu Songnian's family company had been taken over by Shu Bingshan, and whether he even got dividends was unclear. Shen Shu looked over at Yu Songnian, who'd become a poor Cinderella in his mind, with complicated feelings. Though Yu Songnian kept his eyes on the stage, he was keenly aware of being watched. He turned to Shen Shu, like he wanted to say something. The applause was loud, so Shen Shu didn't hear. Yu Songnian leaned closer to Shen Shu and asked quietly in the dark if he didn't like it. Shen Shu didn't answer right away. They were too close. So close that Shen Shu's rational mind screamed warnings. Their eyes met. Light from the stage fell on Yu Songnian's face, reflected in his eyes, absolutely devastating. Shen Shu thought, How could it not be beautiful? Then he said, trying to stay composed, that it was good. Yu Songnian wasn't letting him off that easy, and asked why he wasn't watching then. Shen Shu noticed Yu Songnian's eyes held amusement. He knew he'd been watching him. He was asking on purpose, knowing it was deliberate. Shen Shu didn't answer, and changed the subject instead. The play ended, and the audience got up to leave. Shen Shu stood up, ready to go with the crowd. But Yu Songnian stopped him. Yu Songnian said they should go backstage first to say hi to the friend who gave him the tickets. Shen Shu realized Yu Songnian was different from him, with lots of friends, the type people naturally gravitated toward. Shen Shu followed Yu Songnian backstage where his friend was removing makeup. Seeing him, the friend dropped everything and ran over to hug Yu Songnian, watching them embrace tightly. Shen Shu thought they must be close. Soon, Yu Songnian introduced the friend to Shen Shu as his mentor Su Mo Shen. The mentor still had makeup on, but was warm and friendly. Immediately reaching out to shake Shen Shu's hand, Yu Songnian smoothly blocked him, saying his hands were covered in makeup remover. The mentor enthusiastically invited Yu Songnian and Shen Shu. Shen Shu didn't like crowded situations, but if Yu Songnian wanted to go, he could manage. But Yu Songnian declined. The mentor was disappointed, but didn't push it. As they left the theater and walked back to the car, Shen Shu asked why he didn't want to go to dinner. Yu Songnian looked at him with a smile and said because today is just our date. Warmth flooded Shen Shu's chest, something the night breeze couldn't cool. He'd finally caught up with the boy he'd crushed on for 10 years. At first, he thought it was love at first sight, but it took a long time to realize he really cared about that boy. Shen Shu and Yu Songnian's classroom buildings faced each other, far apart for walking, but close enough for their eyes to meet. He discovered he could see Yu Songnian from the window one evening. The sunset clouds dyed Yu Songnian's white uniform yellowish. He leaned relaxed against the window, talking to friends, his unrestrained smile more dazzling than the sunset. Shen Shu instinctively looked away, down at his test paper, trying to focus on every word, but he couldn't concentrate on his studies. Willpower versus desire. After struggling many times, he finally gave up. He looked out the window in frustration at the one distracting him, like a dessert he knew he shouldn't touch, but was placed right there. So sweet he couldn't help but look. He told himself just a quick look. But Shen Shu never changed seats throughout senior year, until graduation. Watching Yu Songnian was Shen Shu's rare break from his heavy coursework. Sometimes he wasn't sure if he watched Yu Songnian because of study stress, or if watching Yu Songnian was the only thing that relaxed him. It wasn't until graduation that Shen Shu realized he'd never see Yu Songnian again. And the feeling that washed over him then, he never wanted to experience again. So one evening, to get into campus, he climbed the wall for the first time and twisted his ankle landing. When he sat back in that chair and looked at that window, the building across was empty, and that window no longer offered the chance to glimpse Yu Songnian. Thinking about, even breathing felt difficult. Warm tears fell from his eyes. His heart like broken pearls scattered on the ground. Later he forced himself, and when he thought he'd actually succeeded, Lin Jizheng said every person he dated had traces of Yu Songnian. That's when he realized all his efforts had been for nothing. So when he ran into the guy again, he threw caution to the wind and proposed. After their theater date, Yu Songnian asked Shen Shu to see a movie. Before each date, Shen Shu worked overtime to finish everything early, so he was sleep deprived. The movie Yu Songnian picked had too many artsy shots and symbolic plot points that needed careful attention. This made his drowsiness creep up on him. Shen Shu nodded off and eventually ended up leaning on Yu Songnian's shoulder, fast asleep. When he woke up, through his blurry vision, he realized his head was resting on Yu Songnian's shoulder. Shen Shu wanted to sit up right away, but he hesitated. Yu Songnian's chest rose and fell gently with each breath, and Shen Shu craved that warmth. He never imagined he'd be this close to Yu Songnian. Shen Shu didn't regret that impulsive proposal. At least that one bold move got him to where he is now. After a bit, Shen Shu felt he couldn't keep pretending to sleep, or he'd blow his cover and lose everything. He convinced himself of this, but his body barely moved at all. But then Yu Songnian's warm palm cupped his cheek, gently pushing his head back onto his shoulder. Yu Songnian thought he was groggy, his head slipping down, so he adjusted his position. Shen Shu, who was about to reveal he was awake, froze. He held his breath until he felt Yu Songnian, just making sure he was settled. And once there was no more movement, he slowly exhaled. Watching a movie with his crush, he noticed the male lead's profile looked like that half-finished painting, similar features, the same outline as Shen Yuan. Actually, it wasn't surprising. He already knew Shen Yuan and Yu Songnian had a history. Back in high school, he'd seen Shen Yuan and Yu Songnian being really close. Two guys sitting by the pool, faces real close. Shen Shu gathered his courage for the first time, grabbed some watermelon, ready to bring it to Yu Songnian. Even if Shen Yuan, who he couldn't stand, was there too. But he didn't expect to see that scene. At least from his angle, Yu Songnian's back was to him, so at least he didn't have to watch them kiss. When Shen Yuan pulled back and spotted him at the corner, he looked shocked. But Shen Yuan quickly wrapped his arms around Yu Songnian. He leaned on his shoulder and shot him a defiant look. Stunned, Shen Shu immediately left. But strangely, that day he saw Yu Songnian in the hallway, connecting the senior and freshman floors. Yu Songnian sat on a bench with a friend, talking about something. As Shen Shu walked by without looking, he felt Yu Songnian watching him. Shen Shu pressed his lips tight, walked to the vending machine, ready to put in coins, but realized he didn't have enough change. He stared glumly at the coins in his palm. When someone reached over him from behind, dropped in enough coins, and pressed the button for Shen Shu's usual coffee. Shen Shu turned around, his nose almost brushing something soft. Startled, he stumbled back, but the person grabbed him. Yu Songnian looked surprised as he caught his hand, steadying him as he fell back. Just as he was about to say something, Shen Shu jerked away. His heart pounded wildly, and an uncontrollable anger surged up. Shen Shu knew perfectly well Yu Songnian chose to be with Shen Yuan, so he had no right to be angry. Right now he looked ridiculous and pathetic, but he just couldn't help it. Yu Songnian's lips moved, but he didn't say anything. He just took the coffee out and handed it to Shen Shu. Shen Shu looked at the coffee in his hand and said he didn't want it. Yu Songnian looked at the brand and asked him why not. When Shen Shu looked up again, his face had that cold expression he wore for protection, and he looked at Yu Songnian and said, "Why would I accept anything from you?" Yu Songnian froze. Shen Shu walked past him, but the guy's hoarse voice followed from behind, asking again why not, if he hated him. Shen Shu clenched his fists and said with obvious disgust that anything related to Shen Yuan, he hated. The impulsive words brought Shen Shu no satisfaction. It felt more like a sore loser's resentment. Even though he noticed Yu Songnian couldn't forget Shen Yuan, he really had no right to criticize. He and Yu Songnian were fake from the start. Even if they actually got married, it'd just be a transaction. When the movie ended, Shen Shu stood up and headed out first. Halfway there, he realized he hadn't talked to Yu Songnian in a while. Letting that stuff affect his mood was really immature. He turned around and spoke up first, asking Yu Songnian if he wanted to get his favorite Southeast Asian food, but there was no answer. He just saw the guy looking at him thoughtfully. Yu Songnian thought Shen Shu looked exhausted, so he suggested he go home and rest today. But Shen Shu seemed even more upset than before. He even said a bit stubbornly that he wasn't tired. Seeing Shen Shu's unhappiness, Yu Songnian immediately changed the subject, asking if he had somewhere he wanted to go for the next date. Just like that, he pulled Shen Shu out of his gloomy mood in a few words. After they decided on their next date's time and place, they prepared to drive off. But Yu Songnian seemed to see something. He told Shen Shu he'd be right back, then got up and left. A few minutes later, Yu Songnian came back with some roses in his hand. Only then did Shen Shu remember a little girl was selling flowers outside the shop earlier. Yu Songnian went out and bought all the flowers, so the girl could go home and rest sooner. Seeing Shen Shu keep looking at the flowers, Yu Songnian asked if he wanted them. Shen Shu nodded. Yu Songnian felt like just giving a few roses seemed kinda half-hearted, so he pulled out a napkin and started drawing on it. Looking up at Shen Shu as he drew, Yu Songnian's gaze was so focused, staying on Shen Shu's face for so long, it felt like his eyes had warmth, making Shen Shu's cheeks flush slightly. With one simple stroke, Yu Songnian sketched smooth lines, his profile. After finishing the drawing, adding his name and the date, Yu Songnian pushed the napkin and roses toward Shen Shu. He said it wasn't much of a gift, but next time he'd give him something better. Shen Shu gathered the roses one by one, even carefully picking up the fallen petals, saying he really liked it, just like this. But when he was modeling just now, he was clearly facing Yu Songnian head on, so why did the drawing still come out as a profile? Thinking this, he actually asked it out loud. Yu Songnian smiled bitterly and said, "Because most of the time, you're never looking at me." Shen Shu froze slightly, then looked at Yu Songnian. Yu Songnian gave a gentle smile, saying next time he'd draw his face straight on, and he'd do it really carefully, as if coaxing him. Yu Songnian added, "So look at me more, okay?" Shen Shu kept turning Yu Songnian's drawing over in his mind. He folded the drawing and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his chest. Then he told Yu Songnian he'd pay attention from now on. His answer made Yu Songnian freeze. After a moment, Yu Songnian pressed his finger to his lips and laughed softly. Shen Shu didn't know what Yu Songnian was laughing about, but it was good that he seemed happy when they were together. Yu Songnian laughed for a good while before stopping, his eyes glistening from laughter as he looked at Shen Shu. He seemed to search for the right word for a moment, then chose one that fit the situation better, saying, "You're adorable." Taking a friend and his crush out to hang, but his crush mistook the friend for his ex. Lin Zhenji worried he was being played by Yu Songnian. He insisted on joining him and Yu Songnian this time, knowing he couldn't talk Lin Zhenji out of it after hanging up. Shen Shu called Yu Songnian, saying he might bring a friend along, asking if Yu Songnian minded. To his surprise, Yu Songnian said it was fine. He also said he might bring an extra friend too. Shen Shu had met that friend before, the actor from the play, Yu Songnian Sr. Their two-person date turned into a four-person outing, but Shen Shu's attention kept landing on the senior. Shen Shu knew he overthought things sometimes, but he couldn't help guessing about everyone who appeared around Yu Songnian, and what their relationship to him was. Soon the day they planned to meet at Clearwater Villa arrived. Shen Shu picked up Lin Zhejiang first, then went to pick up Yu Songnian and his senior. When he pulled up downstairs at Yu Songnian's place, Yu Songnian was talking with the senior next to him. The senior was dressed casually, similar to Yu Songnian. They looked like a couple. Shen Shu looked down at his dress shirt and discreetly unbuttoned a few buttons to make himself look more casual. Just then Yu Songnian spotted his car and walked over with his friend. The senior greeted Shen Shu, but when he looked at Lin Zhejiang in the passenger seat, his expression changed. Yu Songnian's expression changed too. He glanced at Lin Zhejiang, then looked silently at Shen Shu, his smile fading. The atmosphere in the car suddenly became weird. Silence spread. Shen Shu couldn't figure out what was happening. When they stopped at a rest area on the highway, he went to the shop to buy water for everyone. Yu Songnian followed, walking behind him at a measured pace, just never coming up beside him. Today Yu Songnian seemed colder than usual. He didn't seem like someone who actually wanted to be out having fun. Shen Shu felt a dull ache in his chest. This ache was unbearable. Before he could say anything, he heard Yu Songnian ask him quietly why he brought him. Shen Shu realized Yu Songnian meant Lin Zhejiang, but he'd already told him about this ahead of time. Yu Songnian saw the confusion on Shen Shu's face and sighed. He put it more bluntly. A hint of self-mockery in his tone, he said. He thought all this time that he actually wanted to marry him. Hearing this, Shen Shu said very seriously that he really did want to marry him. Yu Songnian's eyes darkened slightly. Then he asked, "Then why did you bring Lin Zhejiang, your ex?" Shen Shu heard every word Yu Songnian said clearly, but putting them together left him completely baffled. Too shocked to process it, Shen Shu didn't answer right away. But to Yu Songnian, his silence basically confirmed he'd brought his ex-boyfriend to meet his marriage prospect. Yu Songnian sighed, clearly unhappy with this absurd situation. Seeing Shen Shu had no answer, not even bothering to make excuses, he turned to leave, but he was stopped. Shen Shu gripped Yu Songnian's hand tightly. This was the first time he'd held Yu Songnian's hand. Shen Shu explained frantically that they were just friends. Yu Songnian turned around, but his eyes didn't go to him. They went straight to the hand Shen Shu was holding him with. Like he'd been burned, Shen Shu immediately let go. He apologized quietly, a bit dejected. He didn't dare look